This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're joined in the studio by the leaders of New York's teachers' unions, NYSET President Melinda Person. Welcome back to the show, Melinda.
Thank you. And
from New York City, we've got UFT President Michael Mulgrew. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So your unions have been making the case that a better pension benefit is key, or one of the keys, to recruitment and retention of teachers all across New York. And we can get into that argument in a second. But let's talk about the cost first of moving teachers who are on Tier 5 and Tier 6 to Tier 4. I've seen estimates for the cost of doing this just outside of New York City for teachers ranging upwards of $375 million. Do you have a statewide figure for something like this?
There are a variety of different estimates based on this particular change that you want to do. What's expensive is the constant turnover that we're experiencing in the profession.
Sure, we can get to that. But what is the actual cost of doing a couple things, allowing teachers to retire earlier after 30 years, as well as increasing that multiplier for their pension benefits so that it is similar or exactly what Tier 4 is? Do you have a calculation? Because there has been actually a lot of murmur in light of the implementation of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act of state policymakers taking on big initiatives without knowing the cost. So that's why I'm trying to get a sense of what is the cost of doing this first.
So there are a variety of cost estimates. And so things like fixing overtime, right? Those cost estimates are less than $100 million. Then as it gradually increases to different steps of other changes, it can go up to $600 million. Yes, that is true that it could be a state and local cost.
Yeah.
What I think you're missing, though, is that there is a cost of not doing it. And I think that is something that's really important for us to understand. The cost of not recruiting and retaining a state workforce and a teaching workforce is more than the cost of investing.
So it's basically around $600 million for the lowering the age, right, statewide. But the issue here is, why did Tier 6 happen in the first place? So I can give you the history of it because we just got through the fiscal crisis of 2007, 2008, and there was a small coalition of very affluent, rich people in the city and state of New York who said that all the public sector pensions were going to bankrupt the state, which was not true. Both controllers at the time said that's absolutely absurd. That would never happen. But they pushed it through a massive political campaign, and they jammed up every public sector worker in the state of New York. Now the state is dealing with the ramifications of that, which is they can't supply all of the services, both as in education, taking care of the roads, police and fire. They are not able to staff across the entire state.
Okay, but that's not a unique phenomenon that we're seeing across the economy more broadly. A lot of sectors,
but it is a unique
sector,
phenomenon when you realize that the state did it to itself, and it was a small group of affluent people who jammed it through.
Sure, but there are lots of local governments and school districts all over the state who are happy that it was pushed through. So it's one thing to talk about who was pushing it. It's another thing to say who benefited from it. But I want to talk about this argument that the pension is the problem for recruitment and retention. I don't know a lot of 22-year-olds or even people younger who are making career decisions about what their retirement is going to look at like. It's primarily about, well, what is my initial earning potential? And I'm wondering if you do this type of pension sweetener and there is an increased cost to school districts, what does that mean for their ability to address those upfront salaries? Because it seems like they still will be comparatively low. And if I'm making a decision based on salary, why wouldn't I go to another profession?
Educators are making decisions about whether or not they want to go into public service generally based on the pension. One of the most attractive things about public service is knowing that you can retire with dignity after 30 years. And when we talk to our newest members, when they're struggling at five years in, right, when they think about having to do another 40 years, right, it is a deterrent. They do start to look elsewhere. It's not just about recruiting. It's also about retaining people early in their career.
So for us, the issue is up until this point in time, until Tier 6, you would see that once teachers were able to get to 5 years, we still lose a dramatically high number of teachers in the first years. But that's been going on for generations. But what we now have is a new phenomenon. We're starting to lose a lot of teachers after the 5 years. So right now you have public sector workers who've been in Tier 6 for up to 13 years. We're having more people walk away from our profession now between 5 and 13 years than we've ever had before. And they tell us straight up, we didn't realize we were going to have to work 42 years for this pension. I don't want to invest any more time into this, and I'm leaving. And that's what we see. So we now have the data showing us that this is one of the direct problems we're having. So it's a combination of two things. The education teachers have always been what we consider to be underpaid because of what they have to do to even get into the classroom to begin with, the amount of education that's needed. So that's been a countrywide problem for years. But the other piece here is now we are having this bigger problem. The data is showing us in New York, people are leaving now after 5 years, which is a new phenomenon.
But what about the idea that the focus should be on starting salaries and trying to boost those? I imagine that is a bigger deal, especially for someone who, as you point out, is going into graduate school for this employment and maybe is trying to figure out, how am I going to pay for graduate school? Well, if I was making more as a starting teacher, that would be more attractive.
Of course salaries matter, but think about this. By forcing educators to work until 63, you are keeping people around who are at the highest salary of their career instead of giving new educators an opportunity to start at a lower salary.
Well, another way is saying that so we're also pushing out our most senior, veteran, and potentially best teachers.
Yes. But the people who don't want to be there, right? The people that want to retire and are going to have to stay until 63, we want people to be able to enjoy their golden years, right? To go out on a high note. We don't want people there just because they're trying to avoid pension penalties. An important thing to mention here is when you retire in Tier 6, the penalties are extreme. If you want to retire at 55, your pension check gets cut in half. In half. It's not a reasonable penalty. It's a huge, devastating penalty.
So the affordability piece, which you're speaking to in terms of the teacher's salary, is a real factor, right? So we're not saying not to do both. The last 3 years ago, I had to do a nationwide dive into why teachers were leaving the profession and all across different states, and we were able to come up with very significant things. One is their benefits package. They were being diminished more and more across the entire country. The second is the salaries themselves. And then the third one was that teachers feel that they're no longer able to do what they want to do, which is to teach. They were being overwhelmed with paperwork. Those were the three main factors. So if we're going to stabilize our education system, you have to deal with all three. You can't just choose one and try to pit them against each other. I understand your question, but we're not saying one against the other. We're saying we need to do all three. Why are education schools empty throughout the entire United States? Why has it dropped dramatically? It's because of the way teachers have been treated in the public. We are probably the worst country when it comes to respecting educators. When we travel around the world, you'll see a whole different point of view when it comes to educators. They're revered. That has not been the history of this country. But that's a different issue. Right now, we know we have to deal with fixing this horrendous thing that happened to public sector workers across this state that was completely a fabricated crisis that was never true.
What about giving new teachers a different retirement option? Why not, instead of saying, okay, you have to sign up for this 30 years, you're not going to be able to retire till you're 63 or older in the Tier 6 system, why not give them a defined contribution plan like NYSET members who work for SUNY have, which gives them the idea of a portable retirement account, and so that you can be responsive and sort of recognize the fact that some people don't want to do any career for 30 years. I mean, my resume alone is 3 pages long, some by my own choice, some not. But why not give people that flexibility?
I would just say it's important that we have people who are committed to the career and for the long term. We don't want a constant churning and turnover of educators in the state. We want people who are learning year after year and growing and professionally. 30 years in a career is not just a slogan, it's actually a commitment.
But wouldn't this give a person a chance to try that out? I mean, you're talking about people who aren't going into the field to begin with because they don't think the pension is good enough. But now you could say, hey, I'll try this out for a couple years, and if I don't like it, I've got this portable benefit that I can bring to my next career.
Look, we're always looking to look at anything that we feel will help us, but we do know this. Continuity is key to a very good education. All the data and research will show you that. That's why we don't like if they constantly change curriculums and things of that nature. We know that actually is harming students. So for us, it is a very important piece that every school system has a good high percentage of teachers who are there for the long haul. I get your point. Came into teaching as a second career. I understand that I like to change, and we're open to talking about anything as we modernize education itself in terms of the compensation package. But we do know that the basics have to be in place, so each school system does have that, a high percentage of dedicated staff that's trained and understands what that school district's trying to do, because that will lead to better results for the students.
Is there a way, instead of band-aiding this across the state, to let it become part of collective bargaining for each district? If they decide this is the right path for them, if they think there's a way to pay for this locally and they want to go that route, just let them have that flexibility?
The School Boards Association, which represents all of the different school districts across the state, has already taken a position on this. They actually have said, we need to fix Tier 6 because they have recognized that this is having an impact on their ability to recruit the best and the brightest. And I don't think it's necessarily something we have to do local by local or school district by school district. Everyone is on board with understanding that this is an important part of what we need to do as a state to recruit people into public service.
And when the state passed in its constitution that we could not collectively bargain pensions, there was a reason for it. They felt that the teacher unions and other folks could cause municipalities to get into financial trouble. So what you're saying...
Could never imagine that.
So what you're saying is something I'd be open to some degree, but they realized that it could give an unfair leverage to the workers at the local level. So they did it to try to keep a fairness for the overall economic well-being of a municipality.
So one of the arguments for that retirement age before 60 is this idea that this is a profession that wears on people, and 30 years in this job is different than 30 years as a radio host. So why not address some of those working conditions so it can be a career that someone can stay at longer? And if there is a way to do that, what are some of the steps that can keep people in this job longer so we do have those senior veteran teachers in these classrooms longer?
So that's where the collective bargaining does come into effect, right? So there's different locals from across the state, and I'll speak to mine in New York City, where we have created all these different career pathways for teachers who, once they are fully tenured, and that is they can become showcase teachers, where other teachers, newer teachers coming in, can watch them and come into their classrooms. They become model teachers who only work with people, so work with other teachers as they're coming in, teachers who might be struggling, teachers who might be taking on a different or new curriculum. We've created these pathways for teachers, and we want to look to do even more of that. We feel that education as a whole is going to continue very quickly to start to change even more as we move forward, because children are learning in a much different way. So we have to have different options, because that's what is being required of how you teach a student is continually changing. So I agree with you, and that's why we've done a lot of that already, and we want to look to do more of that.
Well, we've been speaking with UFT President Michael Mulgrew. Thanks for visiting us, Michael.
Thank you.
And we've also been hearing from NYSUT President Melinda Person. Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's edition of the Capitol Press Room. For an insider take on what's happening in state government, check out our Dispatches from Planet Albany show, available wherever you get podcasts or at capitolpressroom.org.
Join us again for Capitol Press Room, a production of WCNY Connected, Syracuse.